Those 4 university students fatally stabbed back in November of last year. Now Reddit has shut down what they call a disturbing sub-channel created by fans and groupies of that suspect Bryan Kohberger, seen right there on your screen. The subreddit, called Brynation, had more than 500 members. I do want to talk more about these groups and why some people seem to fawn over murder suspects and convicted killers here. Let's bring in our special guest, Sohom, a forensic psychiatrist, to talk more about this here. Thank you so much for being here.
It's a pleasure, Josh. Thank you for having me on.
So first off, just your thoughts on the fact that a Reddit channel like this exists for someone who is accused of murdering 4 university students.
I think the fact that it exists is in itself quite surprising, but the shocking thing to me is just the number that you said there, right? 500. That's so many people. This is not just the quirkiest, weirdest members of society. This is, you know, a group that's actually quite significant in its scope. So yeah, it is very odd. It's very hard to understand.
So is this something that we see often? Talking more on a broad level here, people showing support and becoming fans of a killer, of a murder suspect?
Yeah, absolutely. So you have, it's usually women falling in love with men who are in prison, who are notorious, including serial killers. And I would say, Josh, that there's 3 different kind of motivations for that. So there's women who have been victims of trauma themselves, who gravitate towards domestically kind of controlling individuals, but in a situation where they can be in control. Then there's the savior complex, and there's also, I think it's fair to say, some people that do it just for the notoriety and fame. I'm happy to expand on those descriptions if you want.
Oh yeah, go for it.
So I would say for the first one, I think it's an uncomfortable truth, but a lot of these women, they have a history of trauma themselves, right? So they've been sexually, physically, or emotionally abused by a partner or maybe a parent. So subconsciously, potentially, they let this cycle repeat itself. So they gravitate towards what's familiar instead of what's safe. But as I mentioned before, there's a little twist to it. So I think that a lot of these women, they feel that they're in a safe relationship with these killers because they have control over the situation. So they know where these guys are. These guys are behind bars. They control things like when they visit, the items that they can send to them in prison. So it's almost like an idealized relationship. So they don't have to go through the mundane day-to-day issues that you have in usual relationships. So you get all the excitement without having to do all the boring stuff like laundry, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the one category. Then I think there's the savior complex. So I think that in some women, there's this overpowering kind of mothering and instinct. And that could be because they were maybe smothered by their own parents. So maybe they had a moral kind of framework forced onto them. So they see these killers, these perpetrators, as somebody that is, or people that are completely evil and damaged. And what bigger challenge is there to try and, you know, change or heal a person than somebody that's a notorious serial killer? And then finally, the third category, in my opinion, is when it's connected to like celebrity worship. And I would stress that this is a small category. A few women have clearly tried to make some kind of fame from this. So they've been in the media spotlight, you know, they've tried to get a book deal or a movie deal. And I think that's related to conflating being infamous and being famous. I think nowadays with pop culture, with social media, people just want to be known. Even if it's not being known for a good thing, it's better to be infamous than to be unknown.
What are your thoughts on the fact that they did shut down this sub-channel? Because as you mentioned, you're going to see things like this pop up. This is not the only time this has happened. It's not going to be the last time. How important is it to shut these down when they do pop up?
Well, I think all big social media platforms have a responsibility to cut off either anything that's related to hate speech or anything that promotes really unsociable kind of ideas, right? So on the one hand, I understand why Reddit did this, and I think they're absolutely right to, but I suppose the problem is, especially with the internet and social media channels, it's really hard to suppress it. So I'm sure the people that made those groups will be able to find themselves in another way, whether it's another platform, chat rooms. So I don't think shutting down a forum gets rid of the problem. I think it just pushes it underground.
Is there any sort of treatment or anything for people when you're talking about psychologically treatment that people should be undergoing if they are becoming fans, groupies, whatever you want to call them, of people who are suspected of killing other people?
Good question. I think the problem is it's almost impossible to force treatment on somebody if they don't want it. So if an individual doesn't have any insight, if they don't see how kind of damaging or potentially dangerous their behaviors are, making these infamous killers even more famous, then it's almost impossible to try and challenge that. I do think that in some cases, if it's people with the kind of backgrounds that I was talking about, so people who've been the victim of domestic violence or maybe physical or sexual abuse from their childhood, then I think there's a scope to change or to challenge their wider trauma. So help them get over everything from anxiety to depression to post-traumatic stress disorder. So that's an indirect way of taking away the baseline problems that they have that might have led them to have romantic feelings to killers in the first place.
A story that a lot of people are talking about right now, and a topic that really does need to be discussed here. Is there anything else that you want to add before I let you go?
I just think that it's quite easy for people to judge these women. And I think that it's an uncomfortable truth, but a lot of the times they have been victims of trauma themselves. And, people who do things that are psychologically really hard to understand don't do it for no reason. It's because something has happened to them. If they have witnessed violence, for example, as a child, then it's quite common for people to try and repeat that cycle. So I suppose what I'm saying is we need to give it attention and we need to deal with it, absolutely, but we should try not to be too judgmental in the way that we approach it, I think.
Well, that makes sense, and I appreciate your feedback there. A lot of great information. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thanks, Josh.